Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to what I think is going to be part 6 of this little series I've got going here on this JCB MIDI CX backhoe loader that I purchased. So I've been doing several repairs on it. Last episode, if you haven't seen that, that was a two-parter because it was a nightmare getting the seized up accelerator pedal removed and taking care of that. That was a lot more involved than I ever thought it was going to be. So if you want a good chuckle, check that one out. But in this episode, the next thing I want to fix, now that I've got the foot accelerator working, is I want to fix the hand accelerator, the hand throttle. So the hand throttle is located right here, to just to the right of the key switch in the instrument panel. And what this throttle is responsible for is basically keeping the RPMs up, so when you're using the backhoe, the hydraulics have enough power. And the only other way you can do it is if you like wedge something onto the accelerator pedal over there. So that's not really that great. So I want to see whether or not I can fix this. Now I can move this freely, and it doesn't appear to do anything. In the previous video, I discovered that the cable that runs all the way down to the injector pump actually is one long cable that runs through the area where the accelerator pedal engages it all the way up to here. So it isn't two separate cables like I originally thought it might be. So it's kind of an interesting design. So if the cable's broken and I have no way of reattaching it to this unit right here, then I'm going to have no choice but to have to replace the entire cable, which I'm hoping I'm not going to have to do, because it was, like I said, it was quite an adventure working on that accelerator pedal, although I probably won't have to take it apart anywhere near as far as I did for the pedal repair. So I'm going to start by trying to take this unit out, which I noticed, I already took the screws out for the dash panel, and I noticed that if I pull the dash panel out, I can see what appears to be screws that actually fasten this assembly to the side here. Well, at this point, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that, yeah, this is going to turn into a bigger project than I thought it would be. Yeah, there's 4 Phillips head screw heads I can see on this assembly down here, but they go through a metal mounting plate, and there are nuts on the back side. I took off the cover here for the fuse and relay compartment, and I can see a couple of those nuts, so I can get to maybe 2 of them, but I'm not going to be able to get to all 4 without removing this shroud right here. And this shroud, which only comes down to here on this side, actually is one big unit that encompasses all around the levers, the control levers, the parking brake, and the control levers for the loader also. It's all one big mess. So I got a whole bunch of screws I got to take out. So there are screws on this side, then there's these screws here, which I think this plate will lift up, and then there's screws actually under the rubber floor pad, the floor mat for the operator deck. So rather than having to deal with all of those screws, for starters, I'm going to just try and take the screws out on this side and see if I can get this to lift up enough to give me the clearance I need without having to take this whole thing out. I started the screws with this simple tool right here because I figured if they were much tighter than that, then I know they would be seized, and if I put a power driver on them, I might end up snapping screws off, which is just going to give me an extra headache. So far all of them have broken loose fairly easily. This one on the back here was a little bit tight, but I did the old trick of doing a quarter turn out when it got a little bit tight, backing it back in again to clean out threads of any oxide and rust on there, and that seems to be working. So now I'm ready to switch over to a little bit of power. Interesting. I would have thought this would be staying behind with the metal bracket and only this plastic part would move, but the whole thing is moving. So it almost appears as if the metal bracket is attached to this housing. Well, on the back side here, looking through the opening where the fuse and relay panel is, I can actually see a hex head bolt or screw that goes up through part of the bracket into this cowling, and I could feel a similar one here and one down under here. Not the easiest to get to, but not impossible. I got the dash panel moved out of the way, and that gives me more room to work in here. But I'm actually going to disconnect the panel altogether because these cables are in my way. If I disconnect them from the panel, I can push the cables back down out of the way, and that'll give me a lot more clearance in here. I can also clean out some of this debris that's in here that's from mice and stuff over the years. I even see what looks like, it looks like the remnants of a rather large snake skin. So we'll get all that crud out of there, and then should be able to get those 3 bolts out, hopefully, and drop this out. I also need to take off, this just slides off, I believe. Yeah. Alright, so this rubber part pops off because this is going to have to pass down through this slot. Here's the view looking from the back of the tractor towards the operator controls. This panel goes on like this, comes off, gives you access to this bank of relays and the fuses down here. And right there, I've got my finger on the screw. So that's the easiest of the 3 to get to. So I guess I'll get that one out first. Let's see. I'm going to guess that's a 10 millimeter. It was pretty easy to get this screw out on this side, so then I was about to start disconnecting all of the plugs from the panel here, and I realized, well, then I should really make a diagram so I remember which plugs go where because of all the switches down there. And then I said, you know what, before I even monkey with that, why don't I see whether or not I could get in here. And not only did I have enough clearance, I had so much clearance I could even get this power driven ratchet in there. So I was able to get all 3 screws out. Now though, the problem I have is this is now disconnected from this, but this, it doesn't seem to be enough room to get this out of here. When I pull down on this to try and get it out, it hits the inside of this plastic housing. So I think unfortunately I still have to go with the plan of undoing a whole bunch of screws for this assembly. The first long screw. Of course, having them all the same size would be too easy because then I'd be able to keep track of which ones go where. So the long screw goes down in the bottom rear part here, if I'm going to remember that. Yeah, so this is turning into a real pain. So the screws that I need to get out to take this assembly out, some of them are underneath the rubber mat here. This one came out. This one started to strip out, so I've got it backed out far enough that I could get some pliers on there, vice grips, and probably twist it the rest of the way out. But I wanted to get this mat out of the way because the mat covers it and it's kind of in my way. So I figured, well, all right, taking the mat out should be easy enough, right? It's just a matter of, by the looks of it, taking this retaining plate, this step plate right here off. It says JCB on it. Well, this little Allen screw came out, no problem. This one started to turn, and then it just kept turning. So it just turns and turns and turns. So apparently there's a captive nut or something underneath there that's probably tack welded or was tack welded to the underside of this floor that has broken free. But I'm thinking maybe I'll take this guard off. Let's see how hard it is to get this off, right? Maybe if I get this off, I'll have enough clearance to get underneath there with a pair of vice grips to hold the other end of this and back that out. All right, these all seem like they're loose enough that they're not going to give me a problem. I got 3 screws out. Let's see if this comes off without a fight. All right, so I see this piece goes behind the fender. Yeah, so the screw for the front part of the fender right here actually goes through the fender and through this. Oh, of course. Why would that be why would that be the same screw as all of these? That'd be too easy. Oh, that's pretty crusty. So I can't get the camera in here to show you exactly how they made this, but there's a plate, a steel plate, about that thick, right here. And then there's a hole. Oh, actually, okay, so this is like a reinforcing plate or something, but I can go behind the plate, stick my fingers up the top of the plate, in there just far enough to feel the captive part with threads in it that has broken free. The question is, am I going to be able to get pliers in there to lock onto that to keep it from turning? Ugh. Looks like I was able to get vice grips on there. Seems to be holding it. This is what the little captive nut, it's an insert. It looks like it was a press fit. It wasn't even welded. So now I can pull this rubber footing up and work on that screw. Well, luckily for me, that screw was able to back out this far before it stripped out, so I've got room to put a pair of pliers, locking pliers on there. So I was able to pull the rubber back here and get to that screw, get that screw out, but the next screw is behind here and the seat's in the way. I can't get in there. So if I want to get that screw out, I'd have to pull the whole seat assembly out, which I don't want to do right now, even though I'm going to do that at some point to clean it and lubricate it. But by turning the seat at a 45-degree angle like that and pulling back that rubber part that covers this back area, I was able to get to that screw, which is just enough screws now to give me the little bit extra clearance I need to pull this up far enough, I think. Yep, there we go. There. There's the assembly I've been trying to get to. Well, that's not a snake skin at all. I don't know what that is. I see some dryer sheets in here, which is a common trick. That's a common attempt to try and deter mice that doesn't seem to work. A dryer sheet that's all chewed up by mice. Alright, I'll work on cleaning that later. Ugh. So these are those little tiny nuts that I've got to get to. Oh, that's cute. 3 screws inserted from this direction, 1 knot. I wonder if that's factory or if this has been replaced at some point. So I'm thinking maybe I just take this nut off, take this lever off and look inside there and see if I can't see what the deal is. So this is a self-locking nut, so I venture to guess that there's probably a certain tightness you tighten this up to, that if it's too loose, the throttle will want to creep back on its own. I know this is kind of not the greatest view here I'm giving you. See if I can improve on that. Interesting. I got some kind of rubber washer here. Metal washer on the back. Like a nylon slip ring. Another one of these deals. So how does that come out?
Well, the camera battery died on me, so you kind of missed me removing this plate, but you didn't miss much. All I had to do to remove this plate was stick needle nose pliers in these two holes and gently wiggle and pull, and it popped right out. When it popped out, a little piece fell out and fell down right in this crack, and I don't know if it made it to the ground or not. I may never see it again, but I caught a glimpse of it as it was falling to see exactly what it was. It was the end of the cable with the little metal piece that's attached to the end of the cable, which locks into this groove right here, this little indentation, and that's what locks the cable in. So what has happened is this cable broke. You can see it's all frayed and twisted, and the reason why is because at some point the cable seized, and it seized and enough of the cable was out so that somebody forcing the handle back the other way ended up actually causing this to back up over itself and crush and get all frayed. But I already put a pair of vice grips on here to act as like a handle and tried pulling with all my might, and it won't move. And I'm not surprised because this end doesn't look too bad, but the other end in the engine compartment, the rubber boot is damaged, and that rubber boot is responsible for keeping ice and water and snow and everything from just migrating down that cable and getting down in there. So this cable is seized. I know this cable all the way up to the engine is one assembly, so I'm going to have to order a new cable and put it in. Well, thanks to the magic of video editing, this will have appeared to have been instantaneous, but it took about a week for this part to come in. So there's the new cable, and I ended up going with reliable aftermarket parts out of Michigan through an eBay purchase, and I bought something else from them already. I forgot what, but they that name's very familiar to me. Might have been something for the Ford 5000 tractor. But anyways, here's the beast. So you can see the weird design here. This almost looks like this got more than one end to it, but what it is this is the end that goes up to the hand throttle. This is the other end that goes to the governor lever, or the lever on the governor housing. But then halfway through the cable, or partway through the cable, there's this break in the cable, so to speak, right here, which is where it interfaces with the accelerator pedal, which you can just barely see in there. It's a pain in the you-know-what to get to. So if there's any JCB mechanics watching this, I'm kind of curious whether or not there is any easier way to do this, but I'm looking at this thing and thinking, yeah, not so great of a situation here. So that's the end of the cable there. Undoing it from there is no problem. Then the cable goes back that way, disappears through almost like a firewall, you know, at the back of the engine compartment, and then we get this little space here. So this is the cable right here. So when it comes through that firewall, it kind of does a loop and then comes down and is held captive in that little block right there, which in my previous video I showed that block is actually got a stud on it that bolts to the end of the foot pedal assembly. So to get to that, you got to get into this little gap right here. Then the cable continues down, goes underneath this whole floor, which is all part of the whole rollover protection system. So if you had a way to do it, you could unbolt the whole rollover protection system and lift this whole thing right off of the chassis of the tractor and have that whole area on top of the transmission and everything exposed, which is where that runs. But I can't do that, so I'm going to have to try and snake it up underneath there somehow and deal with it. And then when it gets to the rear, back over here, down inside there, it comes up through a hole about that big in the floor, which, judging from what I see in there, is where the mice also like to come in and out of. And then it comes up to right here, to this. So, and it just threads into the end of this. So I can actually, because it's disconnected completely, cable's broken, I can just turn this and unscrew this piece, and this will come right off. So I just take this and spin it. And I'll just put this back so it doesn't get lost. All right, so now from underneath the tractor, I can actually pull this down through the hole in the floor. But before I do that, I guess I'll undo this other easy part of the job, which is taking the this end of the cable off. So I'm not sure how this attaches to this spring. Must thread into something there, because that's going to thread it in on the new cable. What do we got here? Yep. Okay, that was easy. All right, so the aftermarket cable uses an actual nut to do the job of whatever this little thing here is doing. So it's just a very thin, small nut. Not going to worry about that. What is that, the unlucky 13 millimeter? Yep. Oh. Good thing I'm not superstitious. All right, so that was easy. So I can see that that just goes straight back. It goes underneath that thin rubber wall, for lack of a better term, and then goes up like this and makes that loop and then goes down. All right, so now I'm up on top of the tractor looking down. This is the dashboard steering column area here. This is the back of the hood that's up. This is that top of what that rubber firewall or rubber material is attached to, that rubber wall. This is actually metal, but it's just a rubber flap below that. And this light gray thing right here, I got my finger on, this is that cable. So you can see the cable kind of goes down, it loops down around and then turns and goes back up towards the engine. So for now, I should be able to pull this right out. And I did. Now I'm noticing that right now, this cable, there's an electrical cable right here that's looped by this cable, and I'm not too crazy about that. That actually looks like that's putting tension on that cable. That's the cable that goes to, where does that go to? The shutdown solenoid? I'm wondering if this has been replaced once before and somebody inadvertently routed this wrong. I don't think this is supposed to be pulling on this cable like this. So the next thing I need to do is I need to get to this nut right here. So right there you're looking at the nut that is on the end of the little stud that comes out of the little block that retains that that cable in there. So I can't keep the camera in there and while I'm trying to get in there and actually get onto that nut, so I'm going to move the camera out and get to work. Okay, so that block now is disengaged from the pedal. Alright, so now you can see this is the block and the stud that comes out of the back of the pedal, but that doesn't completely disengage this from the this area, because there's a bracket that I can't get the angle to show you, maybe from the top again. So there's where the outer sheath of the cable is anchored to a bracket down below the pedal. So that's the next bit of business I got to deal with. Now down here I can get a shot at it this way. So there it is right there. It would be completely obscured by the boot if the boot was intact, but all that's left of that rubber boot is just a couple of little pieces there of rubber. If I move those up out of the way, there should be a nut under there. Yep, there it is. So now I've got to loosen that nut, and the bracket's got a slot facing towards the front of the tractor, which once I get that nut completely unscrewed and drop that threaded section down through the bracket, it's designed so that that cable can go through the slot, and that's how it disconnects from the tractor. Okay, so I was able to get that nut unscrewed. I was able to work from the top, get an open-end wrench on there at an angle, and just turn it a few times, a little bit at a time, to get it loose enough, and then reach in there with my finger and actually spin it off. Now, if for some reason I wasn't able to do that with my fingertips, say that those threads were really crudted up or something, I probably would cut the cable right there so that it was completely out of the way, and then get a 13 millimeter deep socket and stick it right over there and zip it off that way. But I was able to get it. So now I have to pull that cable down out of that bracket. Well, as luck would have it, I still have this trim piece off. But with the trim piece off, I realize now I can actually reach all the way in there and put my hand right on the throttle cable. So I was worried about having to work on this from under the tractor and deal with like working on top of the transmission, and turns out that's not going to be the case. Yeah, so it looks like a mess of hoses and everything underneath there, but let me just wiggle this cable from over here and you'll see it move. You see it right there? Can't point to it because then my hand will be in the way, but it's you can see it moving just a little bit there. Alright, so I was able to pull the end of the cable out that goes to the governor connection there, and here's the part that I was having such a hard time with because it's very hard to get to. And there you can see this is the part that goes through the bracket, and we got a washer and a nut there. So if I just pull on this, I could probably pull it all the way out. But I'm going to hold off on that because I want to see how the cable is routed when it goes this way, to try and keep the cable in the same relative routing, so to speak. Houston, we may have a problem. Okay, so this is an aftermarket cable. I could tell just by the price I paid for it, you know. I think it was $50 shipped. So the problem is that I noticed when I found the part number for this cable, the JCB part number, and I looked, all of these reliable, all these aftermarket ones were coming up as saying, okay, that they are a substitute for this cable, and that they are a substitute for the cable for, and it fit all these different models, and it listed MIDI CX. Now, I don't know, but there may be a MIDI CX excavator. I'm not positive. But it also fits a lot of other ones, like a 3C and everything, which I think are bigger machines. And then I happened to notice when I was poking around, I saw a couple places where they talked about the length of the cable. And I forgot what exactly it was. Like, I think maybe one was like 9 feet and another one was like 11 feet or something like that. I'm not positive. But the point is, this cable's longer. If I line up, this is the intermediate section here. Okay. If I line that up there and I run this cable out, that's where it ends. The old cable ends. This one continues on for over another foot. And in this direction, there's the end of the old cable, and this one continues on for another over a foot. So let's call it foot and a half. This cable's like 3 feet longer overall. Now the good news is, I think I can work with this, because there already was a place behind that rubber, barrier thing there, where the cable was already looped. So I think I'm just going to have a larger loop in there. So that'll take care of that. I'm more concerned about whether or not I'm going to have enough room to get rid of the excess cable going to the hand control? Well, only one way to find out. And there was a label on here. So they are calling this cable an ELV 70-0130, but I guarantee you that's not the part number I used. So this is the cable I ordered. It actually was $43.99 with free shipping. Can't get much cheaper than that. And this says right here that it's a replacement for, you know, all these different models in the title. Okay, doesn't say MIDI CX there. But more importantly, it says that it's a replacement for that part number right there at the beginning, which is what, according to what I found everywhere else, is the part number for the cable that fits all of these plus the MIDI CX. So I notice even when I look at the description, they're not saying that this fits the MIDI CX. So maybe they knew something that the other companies didn't. So this website for MIGA backhoe loader parts. See, they got the cable 4801 JCB inner outer throttle cable, and right here you can see it fits all these models at 3CX, 4CX, 5CX, 214 MIDI CX. So they're saying it fits the MIDI CX. In preparation for reinstalling the cable, I transferred this little block thing over from the old cable. So that's just a matter of, it's got a slot in it so you can slide it up. Once you undo this, slide it up off of here, and this cable will go through that slot. Well, that's disappointing. Not going to work. I was thinking that I wouldn't have to worry about the outer sheath of the cable being longer because I could just take it up in the loop. But what I forgot to consider is the fact that it's the entire cable that's too long. So the inner cable's too long. So you can see I don't even have the spring on yet, and this is way out here. And there's no way to adjust that out. The end result is this is the wrong cable. So that website that I didn't order it from improperly lists this part number as being a sub for the MIDI CX. So I will have to call this company, Reliable Aftermarket Parts, and hope that they have a pretty good return policy, and also ask them for guidance on which is the proper cable for this. Hopefully they have one. Well, it's been almost another full week, and what's in that box is the supposedly correct cable for this JCB MIDI CX backhoe. So I'm gonna lay it out next to the aftermarket replacement I just got in last week that was too long, and check it out. So I'm gonna give you the part number for this in case you're looking for it, but just so you know, I called the dealer, gave him my serial number, he got me the correct part number, then he told me that they could get one shipped to me out of Chicago, which I believe is where JCB's headquarters is in North America. And he said the cost was $318 and change plus shipping. So, yeah. Aftermarket cable, 43 bucks, 2 feet too long. Correct cable, $318 plus like another, I forgot how much shipping. But yeah, pretty much 350 bucks to replace the cable on this darn thing. Not cool. And I searched high and low online with the correct part number, couldn't find it anywhere, and then called another JCB dealer and got quoted the same exact price. So they're clearly working off of a list price. And this is obviously a genuine JCB part because it says genuine parts, JCB on the bag, and of course they had this neat packing tape for the box. And the packing slip inside says that this was shipped directly from JCB Service in Aurora, Illinois, even though the dealer I ordered it from was in New York. So all they do is they take the order and they
to have it drop shipped direct from JCB's warehouse. Now you may be wondering, why not just call these guys directly? You can't call these guys directly. You can't order from these guys directly. At least that's what my understanding is, that you've got to be a dealer to get parts out of directly from JCB. So the correct part number is a 910/60259. So the guy said, oh, well, the reason why it's so expensive is because it even comes with the hand throttle. It's like, well, big whoop. I know that there are some aftermarket ones on eBay that also come with the hand throttle, but they're for that other model that has that longer cable. And they weren't that much more expensive, like $50 or $60. And this is over $300 for this cable. So right off the bat, I noticed that it's gray colored sheathing on the outside, not black like the aftermarket one. And that's what I had on the original one, this gray colored sheathing. And it's ribbed for her pleasure, okay, as opposed to just being kind of smooth like this. And more importantly, when I lay it out side by side against the cable that I pulled out, it is the correct length. So we're good to go. Just gonna install it. So I've already begun installing the new cable, the correct cable this time. Installation is basically kind of working the same way as the previous cable. The only difference is that instead of starting in the middle and kind of pushing that end of the cable that way and this end of the cable this way, I started from the back, fed everything through the back. And the reason why is because this cable has the throttle lever attached to it still. So it would be too difficult to try and feed this through, and it won't fit through the hole in the floor. I could take this off of here like I did on the original cable, but since it's all put together, I really don't want to take that apart and mess with that and just leave it alone. So I just simply started with the end of the cable that goes to the engine, put that down through the hole here, worked its way through. Then I brought it up. So this is the part that actually goes to the engine. I brought it up and out through the bulkhead here so I have a little bit more room to work with getting that part of the outer sheathing of the cable with the adjustment mounted in that clamp. Because we're working again with this tight little space in here. So you have to pull that rubber boot up off of the part of the cable there, and you have to remove one of the nuts completely and slot in the top washer. There's the two nuts there with two washers between them. One washer needs to be on the bottom side of that mount and the other washer on the top. And you take off the nut on the top and you slide the top nut and washer up the cable far enough so that you can slide the cable in through the slot that we can't see in this view, but there's a slot there, and that's how you install this. And then once you get the cable in there, you could slide that bottom threaded section up through and then put the nut and the washer back down onto the threaded part right there. Now I'm not tightening this yet because the reason why there's a nut on the bottom and a nut on the top and that threaded section is actually extra longer is because that is actually an adjustment you can make. This is the part that little block piece with the stud on it that actually attaches to the end of the accelerator pedal attaches to. Unlike the previous part that I showed you, this only has one nut and one washer because the part that goes on here actually butts up against that metal crimped part right there, and the nut and the washer actually are on the underside of it holding it up against that. So it's in a fixed position, it's not adjustable. I'm talking about this piece right here. The position of this does not get adjusted on the cable, it's fixed. And we've got a slot in here, so we slide this over the inner cable and then down over the threaded area and then run the nut up onto it. So there's just enough slack to pull this out here to work on it, which makes it a lot easier. And again, I got to push this boot off to expose the cable so I could slide that slot on that little block piece over the cable and up onto this. But before you do that, of course, you got to undo this nut and slide the nut and the washer completely off so that it goes on after the block. Like so.
Well, how do you like that? So, look what happens when I go to put this spring on. It's almost as if the cable's way too long. And I mistakenly thought that that was because that the entire length of the physical replacement aftermarket cable was too long. In reality, something else is going on here. And I'm beginning to suspect that maybe I could have used that other cable, the $45 cable, because what I'm figuring out is that no matter how much I adjust this, I'm not going to be able to take up this massive amount of slack in the system here. However, what I can do is if I move the hand throttle like so, all right, a little bit further. See, still not good enough. Hold on. All right, that's actually just a little bit too far right there. I'm actually off of the stop screw here, the set screw that actually controls low idle. Back this off just a little bit. There we go. So now that's about the right tension that I want over here, where this spring can't just unloop from this. But I've done that by moving this hand throttle up quite a bit. Matter of fact, it's almost at max. Now right now, if I depress the foot throttle, it will actually work. But what will happen is, it will move this throttle back. I press the throttle down and it forces this to come back, which then creates a situation that as soon as I release the foot throttle, all this slack is back and this can just fall off again. So I think what the problem is I think I have to adjust that hand throttle's stop plates. Because these machines, these JCBs, are so common in Europe and Asia, I was able to find some videos, mostly in Asia, of mechanics adjusting this. Unfortunately, none of them are speaking English. But I can see what they're doing in the videos is they're taking this apart, and you see there's two plates stacked on top of each other here. And there's a tab on one plate and a tab on the other plate. And these are your limits that go up against this stop right here. So what I need to do is I need to reset a few things. I need to reset the handle and the two stop plates in the position that I want, so that I can have a situation that this is pulling out enough of the slack cable so I don't have too much slack in the engine compartment, but at the same time that it's up against the stop so that when I press on the accelerator pedal it can't pull this further back. In other words, if I move this lever back this way, somewhere around here is roughly where I need to be to take up all the slack. Well, if when the lever was in this position, if this stop right here was up against this already, then what would happen is when I step on that accelerator pedal, this couldn't do this and move back. And I think that's what I've got to do here. Here's the original hand throttle assembly. And you can see that this is what holds the cable, right? And then we've got, these are the two plates with the two stops, and they can be relocated depending on how they are lowered over these pins. Furthermore, the whole handle can be relocated or reoriented into these holes. So that's what you got to deal with here. So I'm going to start the tractor and I'm going to advance the hand throttle to the point, the maximum point I can advance it to before it starts actually raising the RPMs. In other words, before it starts pulling, before this spring tension is enough to pull this lever off of this stop. Alright, so I know right now that this thing is pulling on that cable, pulling enough of that cable out to do what I want to do down the other end there. So what I need to do is I need to reorient this plate so that this minimum stop is up against here. But I also want this plate is going to have to move out, this plate, this stop is going to have to move out this way to set the maximum. And I also need to put this handle and reorient it so that when it's sticking out, it basically fits through the slot up here and works correctly. I also believe this nut, which appears to be self-locking, the tightness of this nut regulates how much tension there is on the handle to keep the cable from just freely being able to move back and forth. So let's take that off. And then I get a washer, metal washer, and then a plastic washer. This wants to fall out. I don't think I want that to happen though. Let me see. So I'm just carefully pulling this up. Alright, not going to worry about the handle orientation just yet. Okay, so let's see. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. So at this point right here, the bottom plate with the tab is lined up with that hole. So the distance between this tab and this tab is what I want to preserve when I move this one over. This tab pretty much lines up with that hole. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 positions between where the two holes are that the tabs line up with. So if I take this off, oops. Yep, no, that's what I wanted to do. Now I'm going to take this one off. And rotate it around so that it is up against this stop, or as close to it, whichever hole lines up the closest to it, which is going to be this one. Now I want to put this one back on, but when this one goes back on, I should end up with 4 holes between the two, which right now, let's see. So that's lined up with the tab. So 1, 2, 3. I want 4, so I'm going to move it over one more. Right there, like that. Oh, like that, I believe is what I want. Let's see. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 spaces between the two tabs. So theoretically, that right there would be minimum throttle. So just for the heck of it, I'm just going to throw this back on roughly what I think is going to be the correct position. Yeah, close enough. Just want to test it. Alright. Like that. Well, actually, that seems to be working. I think this has to be tightened so that it puts enough tension on there to keep that from moving on its own. There we go. Okay, so now I think it's working. I'm going to start it up and I'm going to try the foot throttle first, and then I'll try the hand throttle. Yeah, all right. So now I just go to mount this to the plate that goes in here and make sure that when it's sticking up through the operating panel here that this is oriented correctly. I might have to move this over maybe one more, but I think I'm onto something. So I got this mounted to the old mounting plate, and I was getting ready to position this plate inside the housing there, and then I realized I wanted to clean out all of the mouse debris and everything that's in there, and then I started to see some wiring issues in there. I'm seeing insulation that's completely missing, most likely chewed off by the mice. Those of you who've been watching this series know that I've been having a problem with it intermittently not wanting to crank from the key, so I have to jump it at the solenoid, and I think maybe that problem went away mysteriously and now came back again, and I'm wondering if that has something to do with the wiring mess I'm seeing in here. So I ended up fixing the electrical problem I had in here and cleaning out all that debris and everything like I wanted to, and I've got it all back together. I just got to put the rest of the screws in. I just finished remounting the new hand throttle assembly to this, which is 3 little 10mm bolts that are stuck in from the bottom side. It makes that an interesting adventure, to say the least. But it seems like it's working okay, so let's give it one more test now that I have it all put back in. I'll do the foot throttle first. And now the hand throttle. So you can see that when I put it to full throttle, it stops right about here, and ideally the handle would be down here at full throttle. So it seems to me like that this lever assembly should be located like one space over from where it's locked into now, but I'm thinking I'm just going to end up living with it, because to do it underneath there while it's mounted in is going to be a bear. I run very high risk of dropping parts down inside here and then having to take this all apart again. So I don't think I'm going to bother with that. Well, I don't know. I do have pretty good access here with the dash panel out, so I may regret this, but I'm going to give it a shot. Take this off. Move it forward very carefully, one sector or whatever you want to call it. Okay, there's the nut. Then there's the metal and the plastic washer. Now that that handle should come off. So I can't get it to go this way because it's hitting right here. Well, I do have this cover still unscrewed. Maybe I can pull this over. No, that doesn't do anything. That's right, because this bracket, the bracket that this is mounted on, is mounted to the underside of the cover. Nope, the heck with it. I'm not messing with it. I'd have to take those 3 little 10 millimeter bolts back out, drop this control down and move it over, and I just really don't want to have to deal with that. Well, okay, I'm gonna do it. The heck. It's funny, I had so much time getting this in before because I couldn't move this enough, and now just like moved a little bit and it's like a whole completely different situation here. It's funny how that happens sometimes. Okay. So here, all right. Now, remove this nut, move this over one position, and we should be golden. 2 washers. Okay. Now this should be able to come off. Now I'm not going to be able to pull the handle far enough down, so something's wrong there. Oh, must have messed up the stops. Pain in the butt. I think that's right back to where I started. You know what? I'm going to just put it back in and
leave well enough alone like I should have in the first place.
Sometimes it just doesn't pay to get too finicky.
All right, let's try it again. Yeah, I can live with that. Alright guys, I can live with that. I'm going to call this video a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Next video on the JCB is going to be, I'm going to show what I ended up doing to fix the electrical problems that I was having. And alright, so till next time, take care.